The steam rose from the engine like a quiet confession, curling into the late afternoon air on a forgotten county road in Montana, and for a moment it felt as if the world had paused just to watch two strangers stand on opposite sides of a broken car and an even more broken season of life. Caleb hadn't planned on stopping that day, hadn't planned on anything really, but his hands were already moving before his mind caught up, lifting the hood and letting silence take over because silence was safer than words that might ask questions he wasn't ready to answer. Hannah stood a few steps back, arms wrapped around herself even though it wasn't cold, her eyes fixed on the horizon where the land stretched wide and empty. She had been driving west to clear her head, or maybe running east from memories she couldn't outrun, and now she was stranded with smoke pouring out of her car and a tight ache in her chest that had nothing to do with fear. What if this happened to you, stuck on a road with no signal, no plan, and no one left to call? Would you wait, or would you finally let someone help you without explaining yourself? She watched Caleb work without speaking, the way his shoulders stayed tense, the way his face carried a kind of tired patience that felt familiar, like grief that had learned how to breathe. Caleb's life had narrowed down to small, practical things since the accident back in Ohio, since the night his wife's laughter had vanished from the passenger seat and left him with a house full of silence and a toolbox full of habits. He had left his old town with no real destination, fixing things for cash, sleeping where he could, telling himself he was just passing through places instead of admitting he was afraid to settle anywhere that might ask him to feel something again. Fixing engines made sense, because engines broke for reasons you could see and solve, unlike people. Hannah had once believed in plans, in timelines, and carefully built futures, until her marriage collapsed under the weight of unspoken disappointments and quiet resentments that neither of them knew how to name. She had stayed too long, hoping love would remember how it felt at the beginning, and when it didn't, she left with more guilt than anger, carrying it across state lines like a debt she couldn't pay. Her car breaking down felt like the universe's cruel timing, another reminder that no matter how far she drove, something inside her still needed repair. The road stretched on, dust floating in the golden light, and Caleb worked without looking up, wiping his hands on an old rag, adjusting parts with the care of someone who understood that forcing things only made them worse. He noticed the way Hannah's breathing steadied as the minutes passed, how the panic softened into something quieter, heavier. There was comfort in watching someone focus, in knowing that for this brief moment, the outcome depended on skill instead of chance. If you were in this situation, would you trust the stranger bending over your open hood, or would you brace yourself for disappointment the way life had trained you to do? As the sun dipped lower, memories crept in on both of them, uninvited but persistent. Caleb remembered kneeling in his garage back home, grease on his hands, his wife leaning against the doorframe with a smile that used to feel permanent. Hannah remembered sitting alone at her kitchen table after the divorce papers were signed, the house echoing with the absence of arguments she once thought she hated. They stood there together without sharing a single word, yet something unspoken passed between them, a mutual understanding of what it meant to keep going even when you didn't know why. When the engine finally turned over clean and steady, the steam gone, the moment felt bigger than it should have, like a small miracle no one had prayed for out loud. Caleb stepped back, nodding once, not smiling, as if acknowledging a job done but also something else, something softer he didn't have a name for. Hannah felt tears prick her eyes, not from relief alone but from the strange kindness of being helped without being questioned, without being pitied. It made her realize how rarely anyone had simply shown up for her without asking her to justify her need. They didn't exchange stories, didn't trade phone numbers or promises. Yet as Hannah got back into her car, she looked at Caleb standing in the road, the light catching the lines on his face, and felt a pull she couldn't explain. It wasn't romance, not yet, but recognition. Two people carrying different versions of the same ache, crossing paths not to fix everything at once, but to remind each other that broken didn't mean finished. Miles down the road, Hannah found herself crying in a way she hadn't allowed herself to in months, not from sadness alone but from gratitude and regret and a fragile kind of hope. She thought about how easily she had pushed people away before, how often she had chosen silence over vulnerability. Caleb, driving in the opposite direction later that night, felt something loosen inside his chest, a knot he hadn't realized he was still holding. Helping her had stirred something awake, a sense that maybe his hands were meant for more than engines, that maybe fixing things wasn't about avoiding pain but learning how to face it gently. Life didn't change all at once for either of them, but it shifted just enough to matter. Hannah stopped running after that day, choosing instead to stay in a small town in Idaho, taking a job she hadn't planned on, letting herself rebuild slowly without pretending she was fine. Caleb found himself lingering in places longer, offering help more freely, allowing conversations to stretch past necessity. He still carried his grief, but it no longer defined the edges of his days. Sometimes, late at night, Hannah would think about that stretch of road in Montana and wonder what would have happened if her car hadn't broken down, if she hadn't been forced to stand still long enough to be seen. Caleb sometimes thought about her too, about the quiet strength in her eyes, and how fixing her car had reminded him that even in silence, lives could touch and change direction. Just before the story ends, take a moment and tell us in the comments if you've ever met someone who changed your life in the most unexpected way. And if this story truly touched your heart, please gently like, comment, share, and subscribe, because sometimes a small act of kindness, even a silent one, can fix more than we ever imagined.